Be prepared to hear something awesome. Let's go. Let's read together. I charge you, daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles, by the does of the field, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases him. In the depth of prophecy, it goes to a concept of to seven oneself. In the Hebrew, the word ties with seven, and seven means to complete. Complete. And what is she to complete? Daughters of Jerusalem will give you the answer. Because daughters in Hebrew ties with building, in, of, and in Jerusalem you can hear the shalom tie with peace, and by the gazelles, and that beautiful animal. Think about this fat, beautiful gazelle there in the field, and it ties in the Hebrew with swelling up. Right? So she says, I to complete the building of peace by the swelling up. So she's swelling up by that strength, because the second animal that we find there, that doe that we find also sometimes a stag, is associated with a strong one, okay? By that strong and spreading, if you think about a field, it's flat, so it's a spreading out. By the strong spreading out of the severity, because by her being like that and him dying because of that, there is peace. And she says that he must not be woken, right? He must die. He must do it to the full, right? In order to build peace. Don't awake, my love. Don't arise, my love. Do you remember that actually he was tempted prior to the crucifixion, but also while he was there, to get himself off the cross? But he didn't. He saw it through until it bends him. He bent into death. To do that. So thus, it pleases God's salvation. He's bending into his death. The perfection of God's word is so fearsome. It's almost frightening to speak it. God is awesome. And it carries on. Because here comes the next. What we have in the English as voice. In the Hebrew, it goes to a cry, and even more, it's a bleat. It has associations with a crackling, bleating cry. Jesus was crying out, we find that word, crying out, it is finished. He took the full fervor of the complete severity of God's judgment. And she says, the cry, the bleat. Remember, he is the sacrificial fulfillment of all the sacrificial animals in the Jewish system. The crackling is what the sound that a fire makes when it's busy eating and consuming. Cry, that voice of her beloved, Jesus, and the word ties with the beloved that burns, right? While she was busy severing herself, as you just said, she needs to do that. Then she says, behold. In other words, we must see. If you were standing there witnessing, hearing him, the beloved, cry, she says, see, behold, this comes. Okay, so what is now coming? What is leaping, right? What is skipping there? It is upon the mountains. Mountain in Hebrew ties with to be hot, to be inflamed, of this burning up. Jesus, on the mounting up of being inflamed in God's wrath, cried with that incredible, bleating, crackling cry, it is finished. See, it comes. It is skipping upon the heels. Now that word that's translated there is skipping, ties with drawing together. Now if you think about somebody that skips, it's like they draw their limbs together in order to do that jump. It is a contraction of limbs. Now, that is something that is seen in the death image, and in the Hebrew it ties with that. So she's saying, see, the bleating cry of my beloved burning, behold, this comes leaping over the burning heat in the contraction of limbs. Die. The dying, the convicting of the beloved that was burning. Yeah. It's like my beloved, a gazelle. Now you already know that ties with swelling up. And the beloved ties with the one that is in the image of boiling. Right? Jesus being the son of David. David's name means that, and he ties in the root to boiling, and Jesus fulfilled that. So she describes him. Remember, okay, before we go into this description, understand the purpose of this woman we've spoken thereof. This woman, in the first level of prophecy, is busy explaining to the women of Jerusalem who don't know who the Messiah is yet, and considering many possibilities, she's telling them who he is. Can you hear who he is? He's from that line of David, the Davidic line, but he's the one that fulfilled the prophecy in his name, becoming the son of boiling. So she says, is like my beloved. They ask her, why is your beloved the only one? My beloved ties with boiling. My boiling one, says the fiery justice and wrath of God, is like a gazelle, is like a swelling up. Or you can think of him as a young stag, right? Young, that word ties with ash, because it's an ash-colored animal that God has blessed. God is using his creation to testify, and it testifies his glory, which is in Jesus. It is an ash-colored, powdered, dusty image. Remember when Adam and Eve fell into sin, mankind, the punishment for sin being death, they would return to dust. So we find this dusty ash image being tied up with dying. So she's saying, my beloved that boils in the fiery justice wrath of God is like the swelling up of becoming ash. It's the one who died. It's Jesus. And she says that stag, in the Hebrew, that word ties with the one that's strong to turn. Strong to turn. She says Jesus is the one in the image of death that can turn. He turned death by breathing out his breath and living. That's the burning bush prophecy. Remember the burning bush? You had the crown of thorns that's shown there on the cross. Jesus is the crown of thorns with a fiery justice and wrath in his midst. And he died and he rose. Moses saw that in a living metaphor prophecy. He saw a fiery bush of thorns encircling the flames. And from that was spoken the holy name of God, Yah, in abbreviated form. God breathing out his breath. Therefore the bush is green. That was what intrigued him. How can it be green and have the fire? How can Jesus, who is in the thorns with the crown around him, breathe out, have the fire, and be green? By rising. That is the Messiah. That is my beloved. My boiling one is the swelling up of dust, of dying, the stag, the one that can turn death. That is a prophecy that is placed there in the names of God. Please click on the channel. You've got to hear that. Even the name of God testify this. It tells you who he is. Remember, he turned the darkness by his word in the beginning. Prophecy fulfilled in Jesus. Because when he breathed out his breath, being the young death stag, the one that's in darkness, Jesus hanging on the cross, turning the death verdict by being united to it. It's the only way, by him breathing out breath, that we can have life, because he fulfilled her. And we find it's shown in Genesis 2, the only way whereby we find that God has given life in the first place was by breathing out his breath. Behind our wall, there is the testimony of the death of Jesus that is now looking through. And the piercing is what is prophesied in a window. If you just look on the screen there, you see the holes in the wall, right? And it forms a window. And in Hebrew, piercing ties, like making holes, ties with a window. So Jesus was pierced on the cross. Jesus had a Roman soldier pierce his side, and the water came out and the blood. All right, Jesus died. The gazing through ties with sparkling, all right, sparkling through the lattice. And the lattice, it looks like a type of net. If you think about a net, right, and you can see it also in the image there on the screen. He was caught. Remember, Jesus was caught in the traps of this woman. Jesus was caught literally being arrested there on the Mount of Olives, again a prophecy, because he's the prophecy of that olive that would be crushed, united with a fire to ignite the light. Okay, it is so thick, it's on so many levels to help you to know it's true. Just like whole creation is busy testifying in the song. Because God is the creator and He's telling you how you live. It's by Him, breathing out His breath. So she says, behold, this is established, right? This is standing. Standing means it is upright and it stands. It is established. Jesus did it. It is done. Behold, this is established. It stands behind our compacting. And gazing through those piercing the windows, those piercing wounds, sparkling through the net, being caught, being arrested there, and taken captive and hanging on the cross, sparkling through that is your redemption. Understand, that is what the beloved, boiling Son of David is like. There's only one born from that line that did that. It is Jesus. And remember, she went all the way, spreading out flat. She went all the way. He died. He breathed out his breath. He was pierced. And what happened next? He was laid in the tomb, just as was prophesied. All right, everything to be said and to be fulfilled, what God said would happen to him. Isaiah 53 fulfilled. And she said, spoke my beloved and said to me. Right, Jesus, her associate, but in the image of the one that's boiling. Right, Jesus taking the boiling wrath of God, and she being that fire of His, the justice of God, united to its bridal image. It's almost like a bridal chamber that they entered in. His bed was His deathbed. She followed Him there. Right, spoke my beloved and said to me, rise up. In other words, she's the fire. Flare up, my beloved, right, my fair one. What is translated there is fair, ties with brightness. The fire flares up in brightness. He says to her, flare up, my beloved, bright, come away, rise up. Jesus said, come, flare on me. Because she went with him into his tomb, now you're going to hear the most beautiful speech and explanation about why she's to come away. Let's go there. Winter is past, and the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth. The time of singing of birds has come, and the voice of the turtle is heard in the land. For lo, alright, that word in the English starts with behold. For see, the winter is past. Alright, the winter ties with the time of darkening, and that's death. For see, the death is now past, and what is translated there as past ties with crossed over. In other words, Jesus went through the valley of death. It's crossed over, and the rain ties with showering, a violent showering of water. In the Hebrew, that ties with watering, ties with wasting. Remember when he was on the cross, that to check that he was dead, that Roman soldier pushed a sword into him, and there was water coming out and blood coming out. The violent showering of wasting, of watering, of death. The darkness is gone. He has died. In other words, the death verdict is departed. And we almost have, if you think about winter and spring, there comes new life because the winter is gone. It's prophecy of Jesus. We live on earth in His testimony. It's all around us. The flowers, in other words, the shining brightness is visible on the earth. That ties with firmness. You think about the soil, it's firm where you walk. Brightness is on what is firm. Because Jesus has taken the fiery justice and wrath of God, we have a firm place to stand on, and there is brightness upon the firm. It is the time of singing. It's the time of rejoicing. And it also ties in the Hebrew with plucking, like with a musical instrument, like plucking the harp with your fingers, and thus tie with plucking, with trimming, all right, with trimming the vines. It has come. And the cry, right again there, that that cry, that bleating cry, it's the it is finished cry of Jesus, who is the fulfillment of the sacrificial lamb. The cry of the ring dove. And we find in that ring, right, there's a circular image there, it ties with turning. The cry, the bleat of turning. It's Jesus who has cried, it is done, is heard in land. The fig tree put forth her green figs, very important. And the vines, the tender grapes, give a good smell. Arise, arise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. Right, very beautiful, very poetic and wonderfully beautiful to listen to that. And you see the image of the fig trees and the vines and spring and ripening. But you must stop there because it's green figs, all right? So what is it with a fig tree? The fig tree in the Hebrew ties with meeting or encounter. It is the encounter between the two of them, the groom and his bride, in the bridal chamber, in the bed of the groom, his tomb, all right? That meeting was putting forth something. It rendered. What did Jesus dying on the cross rendered? It rendered green figs. Green figs ties with motionlessness. In other words, still, it's like lying in death, motionlessness, hard-headed motionlessness. And the putting forth there, spicing, giving motionlessness, death, the embalming in spice of death. And the vines. Now if you think about earthly vines, they look as if they're in pain. It's contracting. It is bending and twining, contracting. It is his suffering on the cross that's prophesied therein, right? Rendering great blood testimony, okay? It's his suffering. So thus the bending and twining is the contracting of smell. That word in Hebrew is ruach, breath. So listening, on the meaning level, the encounter ripened and put forth embalming, spicing, motionlessness. The encounter rendered death, and the twining, his suffering, breath. Rise up, flare up. If you talk to a flame and you say rise up, ignite, right? Rise up, my associate, bright. And what does flames look like? When they get that extra oomph, when they're busy consuming, they get something, they flare up, they become huge, become excruciatingly bright and hot, and come away. He's edging her on into his being dead, being fulfilled by him. Oh, and here comes the beauty. You must hear this. We're going to talk about this in the next video, when he says, my dove, in the cleft of the rock, in the secret of the cliff, let me see your face. It's so beautiful. But the prophecy, it'll blow your mind. See you next time. God is blessing us. Praise him.